Living on the air in Cincinnati. Cincinnati, WKRP. Google it. What it do, people? Thanks for clicking Treats TV with Chan. I'm your host, Chan. So, when we break, we break, right? I'm watching Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore. He's talking about the situation with Starbucks trying to have the baristas talk about, have race talks and things of that sort. And somewhere he does a hashtag. The hashtag is reparations tab. So people are up in arms still about the whole reparations thing, still about, I'm not paying reparations. Who gets reparations? Why do they have to have reparations? Whatever the case may be. Here's what I've learned about America, the business. Let's call it what it is. And being an American and being an African American in this whole pot. It's built on people owing. It's built on collecting, because you're going to get what that person owes you, whether you traded people or however. A lot of people, it's also built on a whole bunch of secrets, griminess, and lies. People right now, when you have to establish who is an African American, and that's not what the Constitution says, by the way, when you have to discover who's an African American, when you have to discover how much is going to get paid, who's exactly going to pay it, why do I have to pay them, and all of this other stuff, and they're dealing with, well, I'm here now, I have nothing to do with whatever. Here, let's talk about it. The Constitution has that an African American, and that's not the word that's there, is anyone who is an eighth, which is an octoroon, an eighth African American or black, or whose mother was black. Okay. People don't really want to do the dig. You don't really want to hear that your whoever, great grandmama, whatever, on whomever side on the low was black. You don't want to hear that, your great whoever breastfed, because you got to think about during plantation times, breastfed off of African American, and your DNA, her DNA, and all of that other stuff is mixed within your lines. You don't want to deal with the fact that, when they really break down the global chart, a whole lot of people are African Americans. That's one. Then they're dealing with how are they going to pay, how are they going to pay this out? So they do a fictional formula, and they come up with a fictional number. Nobody really did the math. So when they really do the math, it's for real. They do a fictional number, and they come up with 1.7 trillion. I was reading a poll and reading, up on this. So they come up with a number of 1.7 trillion. They do the math for how many African Americans descending from slaves and also workers and things of that sort. Because even after slavery, you still have workers, indentured workers, and all of this other foolishness. People who couldn't leave the plantations because of, and all of the fun things that go with the building of America. And they do the math for divided by how many people could be descendants or are whatever. And it comes up to like $40,000 per person. And while I'm reading the polls and I'm reading all of this data, and it says somewhere along the lines that it doesn't come up to much. Hold on, we're going to address that. It doesn't come up to much. It's not anything. Then they say, and thereafter, for the interest in whatever other number, you receive $1,600 per year. After that, for the payment, for the payback. Let's not talk about the 40 acres and a mule that is in stone that you people don't want to deal with. And I say you people because everyone wants to be an enthusiast. They want to go back as far as time to do the reenactment of the Civil War, but you don't want to go back and pay your interest. America is a place that right now, if I pass and I have debt and my mate is still alive, they're going to still attach him for my debt. My children somewhere accrue my debt. If it's worked out that way originally. America wants their payback. But when people ask in a polite manner, this is what was explained to my family. Can I get a smidgen? it doesn't amount to anything. Well, this is what it amounts to. You don't, if you've never been oppressed, you can't imagine the feeling of every day being oppressed. Just imagine the African Americans that everyone is so scared of breaking into your home, taking your wife or your daughters. Do I have your attention? And doing with them at will what they want, how they want, impregnating them, and you having to look at these people consistently, what it does to your psyche, the children's psyche, the grandchildren's psyche of how grandpa was this way, he used to be a broken man, and the grandmother sitting there being your grandfather used to be a great man. Let's deal with the psyche of the young girl who can be 12 and has had things done to her, and now you as a father or brother or whatever you are, not truly wanting to deal with your sister or your daughter because now you know she's been touched. Why didn't you fight more or whatever by this person? Let's deal with the psyche that gets trickled down, how a person can be great and then all of a sudden start to feel less than, and he passes this trait or she passes this trait on to their children, who later on, when you look at 5 generations removed, have turned out not to be much because it's built in your DNA. It's built in your psyche that you're less than, that someone can invade your family structure, that can tell you when you can and cannot come and go, There is something that's built into that DNA and into that psyche. So now this person, this family for generations have not excelled, has not tried to get outside of their, it's there. This is how life is. This is where we're from. We're just from the Carolinas. We don't, it's nothing else out there. Until maybe you get one in a generation or a few in a generation that say, listen, it has to be more. There's more because we can't go past this city line. But what about all the generations? So it does trickle. There is a payback that is needed. That's just the psyche of it. Let's not talk about the interest that has accumulated for all of that time. And then let's talk about the companies that have direct paper trail to slaves. So the one fictional $1.7 trillion is just a piece that, all of whomever pays. You can pay your $99 to Ancestry.com to find out who you are, to prove that, because you paid the Indians, you gave them their 40 acres and a mule. They have their land, their casinos, and so forth. And for them, you have to really, really prove that you are a Native American. Oh, you don't just get your test and then say, no, you really have to break it down. They have to know that this, somewhere along the lines, this last generation was a Native American, kind of close, within the last 4, or a grandparent. So what is the difference when it's time for America to pay up? Bootleggers, arms dealers, and whatever else America is built on. Slave drivers. You have to deal with what you've dealt. But you will dish a hand of justice quickly to the current and won't deal with the past. Reparations tab is possible. It's what you feel. Yes, a lot of us, African Americans or whomever you want to call, are going to mess up the money. That's not your business. I see a lot of different people mess up some things. Clinton was condemned before they even found out about his situation, when he went and said, I apologize to the African Americans for your plight. I'm not harping on slavery. I'm not in that place. I'm not even going to touch all of the horrific details that you can always pick up a book and read. God forbid you read. Let's just deal with the mental state of someone and living in fear, and someone having to do something they don't want to do on a consistent basis and getting nothing in return for it. But you're going to tell me that my granddaughter is not owed her property that she built. She can't have the shack that's still standing, that I left her, that is behind my father's house. She can't have a piece of the land that these people now, so you don't really want to deal with it. When you look in and you trace it and they find out, oh, well, actually that's my property from my great-great, but they paid the bank, it's a way to resolve anything if you really want to resolve it. I'm not on 2 acres. And I know y'all sitting there like, yo, Treats TV is on a roll. 2 acres. I mean, an acre is a football field. An acre is 40 acres and a mule. Give people their just. Don't give them 40 acres. Give them an acre. Give them their football field. We don't need mules anymore. But if my parent worked at Ford, if my ancestors worked at Ford, you pay out in stock, you pay it out in however you give everybody a share. You are telling people that $1,600 doesn't do anything. But for people who live in the cities, Chicago, New York, and places that have trains, that $1,600 goes to their Metro card. And if you're African American and you feel like I don't want it, and more power to you, then there are a lot of people who are prominent African Americans who pay out to charities. Charities cycle back out for you, whether you know it or not. So whether you want it or you think we deserve it or whatever the case may be, pay your due. I forfeit mine, but I leave it in a trust for my children. You cannot tell people what it does for them. If you owe, you owe. And that's a fictional $1.7 trillion. When they really do the math and you look at how Johnson & Johnson was built, and you look at the heart surgeon who, did all of these things, and the people who came up with the stirrups and all of these other things, who built these inventions that you right now use, that this person's great-grandchild is here, and you never paid out any even interest. Don't give us the money. Pay out the interest. You pay what you owe. You can't tell people with something $40,000 for all of the million African Americans or parts of in the U.S. is another inventor who just needs the funds for backing. He needs $40,000 to start up his company. Let's say he only needs $20,000 to pay for the patent. You can't tell somebody what's something to them and what's not. But you owe me, so own yours. Because you always want everyone else, African Americans, to own what they've done. You have to stand before the justice who does not treat you fairly. You have to answer to an officer who does not. All of the mindset, the psyche that went with slavery, that went with after it was abolished, everything that went after that goes with it, is what you're paying for. It's retribution. We have to pay fines. We have to pay all of these things for a mindset. For a mindset. You're implementing your will on someone who is minding their business. You got to hold it. And that's just as simple as that. So pay out the 1.7, which is a small fictional number. Deal with it. Corporations, take that little bit of money, set it to the side and pay it out. Put it into college funds. Whatever you need to colleges, whatever you have to do, you paid out your money and let's move on. But don't tell somebody what's something to them and what's not. And they'll never get it. They probably won't. No one's going to make this stink. Everyone's not going to get in the uproar. And they're willing to pay out that little bit of money for you getting cracked in your head for the loss of the life of the person who, because they're being taught already that we really ain't got to pay you nothing. America. It's just something for y'all to think about. I took a long break. But this one kind of got under my skin. Not because everyone's looking for a handout. Because I personally am always advocating for equal and fairness. Nothing else. No bullies, no meanness, and so forth. And at some point in my life, and whether it came now, when I'm an adult, I finally really experienced the racism. Normally don't, because I don't see it. Try not to. That didn't just happen. Nah, that's them, not me. But I walked finally into a courtroom to fight for my family with what I think is the right thing on my side. Because this is not how people are supposed to live, right? This is not what we work for when you're doing all of the right things in America. And I'm not trying to show my children that you don't live like this, you shoot for this. And before the court situation really got underway, the judge himself in Elizabeth, New Jersey, small claims, said out of his mouth, "So what are you here for? You're trying to get something for nothing? You want reparations? What do you want, reparations?" You're used to speaking to people in that matter because America, politicians, and that's a politician, have decided what people, but African Americans, are entitled to. My answer to the corporate, some say very biased, ethnically, was that no, I'm not looking for reparations. I want to be reimbursed. Now that's a transcript, that's on paper. The average person that he's used to dealing with, his perception of or talking to in America, especially in that region of New Jersey, that is an African American, would not have caught normally the slight that a judge made on record out loud in a courtroom full of people when his clerks and everything else, and a Muslim woman is transcribing, and his clerk is African American, and his bailiff is some other nationality, not a Caucasian. And he still had the nerve to say it. Reparations is for when you feel you have been wronged, you have been hurt. Reimbursement is when you have paid out monies for services, that was not delivered, or a loan or such. It is being said and done to you all the time, and it is allowed because what the head does, the body follows. I Googled this judge, and he was appointed by Christie. They all appoint them, handpicked. When you look up the location where this case was at, it is Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is a majority minority. We're not asking necessarily for anything or a handout. We were wrong, some of us, some of their children, their great-grands, and so forth. And they're asking for the payment for services rendered. Listen, people, I'll see you next week. Hit me on my inbox if you're on Facebook. Tweet me. What else we got? Instagram. I don't even use, first of all, I'm sorry, y'all. I don't use the Twitter and the Instagram, but I'm going to be more aware of these things. Hit me however you got to hit me. You can Google anything. You can find people however you want to find them. So if you want to put a subject in an inbox, you'll get it to me, right? Facebook is probably easiest because everybody's on Facebook, and that's Treats TV with Chan. See you next week.